Good evening, everyone. On behalf of English Language Teachers Association of India, I welcome you all to the 98th webinar titled Rabindranath Tagore and a Collage of Thoughts, an Exploration of the Santiniketan Essays. Dear participants, I have a few announcements for you. Certificate of participation will be issued to the students, foreign participants, and the ELTAI members who attend the entire session. We have a chat box facility on this platform. You can share your opinions and views related to the topic. You can post your questions and queries here. The speaker will answer some of the questions during the question and answer session. I request you not to post any personal information in the chat box. Before moving on to the webinar, may I request the participants to watch ELTAI promotional video. Thank you for watching the video. Now we have with us Dr. Shabreen Sultana Shaik, the moderator of today's webinar. Dr. Shabreen is working as an assistant professor in the Department of English, Bapatla Engineering College, Bapatla, Andhra Pradesh. She has 10 years of experience in teaching English language. She has been trained as a master trainer by the Andhra Pradesh State Council of Higher Education in British Council. She has served as the resource person in many seminars and workshops. She is the convener of English Language Teachers Association of India, Guntur chapter. She penned a book titled English Language Learning, published in 2020. I request Dr. Shabreen to moderate this session. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Raghavendra sir. Good evening and welcome to ELTAI Webinar 98 entitled with Rabindranath Tagore and a Collage of Thoughts, an exploration of Santiniketan's essay. First of all, I would like to thank ELTAI Webinar Organizing Committee for giving me an opportunity to moderate this session. I am delighted to introduce today's resource person, Dr. Medha Bhattacharyya, a Fulbright Scholar in residence at Bridgewater State University, USA. Currently, she is teaching in the Department of Communication Studies and English. Prior to that, she worked as an assistant professor in Bengal Institute of Technology, Kolkata. She has authored a book published by Routledge, London and New York with the title Rabindranath Tagore uh, Śāntiniketan's Essay, Religion, Spirituality and Philosophy in the year 2020. She was an academic advisor for the entry on Rabindranath Tagore in the 20th century Literary Criticism series by the Centage volume number 324 in the year 2016. Dr. Bhattacharya received a prestigious award, a certificate of appreciation from Maulana Abul Kalam Azad University of Technology on the occasion of Teachers' Day celebration 2018 in West Bengal for her outstanding contribution to teaching, learning, and research. She has been invited to deliver talk in India and abroad, including with Harvard University, Pennsylvania, and University of Princeton. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our resource person, Dr. Medha Bhattacharya. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shabrina ma'am, for that elaborate introduction. And congratulations on your book. My gratitude to ELTAI Webinar organization and its team for inviting me to talk on the occasion of Rabindranath Tagore's 162nd birthday celebration 2022. The title of my talk is Rabindranath Tagore and a Collage of Thoughts. And I'm going to talk about the Śāntiniketan Essays, keeping this in mind. So a little bit about the essays. Tagore was about 47 years of age when he began to deliver his Śāntiniketan lectures. The lectures started in 1908 and ended in 1914. And it was due to the initial or informal request by Kiti Mohan Sen, who was the grandfather of the Nobel laureate Amartya Sen, who was also a teacher in Tagore's school, to impart to him and the other young teachers that were there the experience, or rather the feelings that he had, or the thoughts that were generated in his mind after Tagore's dawn meditation in Śāntiniketan during the Brahma Muhurta, which is a time between 3 to 3:30 in the morning, or rather, we can't even call it morning, it's a dawn. So on the birthday, Tagore relented to their endless request and decided that he would impart to them the gift of his experience of that dawn meditation. So before I get into the collage of thoughts that are reflected in the Śāntiniketan essays, I would like to talk about how his thoughts came about. The dominant thoughts that you have, or the predominant themes that come up that reflect his thoughts, are love, finite and the infinite, and the harmony of the opposites. This is very much prevalent. So Tagore has influences from the Gita, I would say, the Upanishads primarily, but we also see some reflections of the Gita. He had reflections of the Bible and Vaishnavism, of course, and Buddhism. And all these helped him to form his thoughts. Now, what made a 47-year person be so deeply philosophical? It is not that he hasn't written deeply philosophical essays before, but the reason Śāntiniketan Essays, which consist of 152 essays, consisting of 17 sections, which were later compiled in 2 volumes. So these essays were primarily, the first 9 sections were the talks were delivered. Initially they were talks and later written as essays. So the talks were delivered in the premise of Śāntiniketan, which is in West Bengal. And later on he started delivering the talks for other kinds of audience who would gather in the prayer rooms in Śāntiniketan as well as in Kolkata. So the reason why he started delving inward so much was, in a way, the death of his relatives and friends and his own frail health around that time. And this kind of helped him look inward. In Tagore's philosophy, according to Edward J. Thompson, who is a Tagore scholar and translator, there are 2 dogmas, and they are the dogma of love and the joy of the universe. And Tagore, as Thompson remarks, believed in this too till his last breath. There is a reflection of this idea in the Śāntiniketan essay as well. And Vishwanath Naravane, in his book, Rabindranath Tagore, A Philosophical Study, mentions, I quote, "In Tagore philosophy, love and bliss are almost interchangeable terms. His utterances about bliss and joy are reminiscent of the Vaishnava stress on Hladini Shakti." I'll talk about this briefly later on. And without love, as per Tagore, there is no joy, because it is only love which brings about an overwhelming feeling of bliss or joy. In the Śāntiniketan Essays, we see the influence of Buddhism, Vaishnavism, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, and of course, the Upanishads. And the Upanishadic mantra that inspired Tagore also inspired his father. And the mantra is, Isha Vashyamidam Sarvam Yat Kincha Jagattam Jagat Tena Taktena Bhunjita Ma Gridha Kasya Siddhanam. And it means, I quote, "In this world, everything is perishable, yet pervaded by the Supreme Being. So protect the Atman by renunciation. Never have greed for anyone's wealth." Now, before I proceed, I should mention that whenever you see quotations later on, and even in this particular quotation, when you see the Atman or any word in small letter and then another word in capital letter, starting with a capital letter, the smaller one means it's the individual self or the individual Atman. And the one with uppercase means the divine. So this will help us to understand the quotations better. I'll talk briefly about just one Tagore text and this idea, and then quickly go on to the Śāntiniketan Essays. So I'm going to refer to Tagore's aspect of love. And as I have mentioned earlier, it's a dominant theme. I will refer to Gora. It's a novel by Tagore. It was serialized and finally published in one piece in 1910. And here, Gora is actually an Irishman adopted by a Brahmin family. And his mother, Anandamoyi, loves him without any kind of external barrier. So she does not even see that this is an Irishman, I'm a Brahmin woman. In those days, it was that there was a concept of untouchability. But she went beyond that and she loved her son, adopted son, and in such a way that he did not even feel that he was adopted. So he had vouched for the Hindu way of life, and he felt anyone who wasn't a Hindu wasn't having the idea of nationalism. So later on, when he discovers that he himself is a Christian, not even an Indian, so he transcends his limited ideas about nationalism and broadens it or goes beyond it to internationalism. And he says about his mother, I quote from the text, "Mother, you are my mother. The mother whom I have been wandering about in search of was all the time sitting in my room at home. You have no caste, you make no distinctions, and have no hatred. You are only the image of our welfare," end quote. So this reveals how the finiteness of the love between a mother and a son, which is a very close, tight bond, reaches an infinite dimension. Because a mother does not discriminate against her children on the grounds of sex, caste, or religion. I will directly go to the Śāntiniketan Essays. In the essay, Detachment, Tagore explains this whole concept through Yajnavalkya's words. Yajnavalkya was a king who renounced his kingdom and divided it among his wives and relatives and proceeded towards self-realization. And he says, I quote, Nava Arya Putrasya Kamaya Putra Priya Bhavanti Atmanastu Kamaya Putra Priya Bhavanti. So this means, I quote, not because you desire your son that he becomes dear to you, but because you yearn for the Atman alone that your son becomes dear to you, end quote. So the son is the finite aspect of the infinite Atman. Hence, when a person loves his son, he feels that it is the son to whom he is dear to, but actually it is a finite step which he is taking in love to reach the infinite. We also find a similar idea in Gitanjali, Song Offerings 34, poem number 34, sonnet 34. And Tagore mentions, I quote, "Let only that little of my fetters be left, whereby I am bound by thy will, and thy purpose is carried out in my life, and that is the fetter of thy love," end quote. This poem reflects bhakti. And Tagore equates love with bliss. This also reflects how the finiteness of love transcends and goes beyond to the infinite dimension. We can see the same translation of love and it is not confined to Tagore's poetry alone, but pervaded other genres. And we can see the idea of, like Naravane mentions, the god of, I quote, the god of Gitanjali is emphatically this Upanishadic god in whom power and punishment go side by side with love, end quote. So the reconciliation of power on one side, power and punishment on one side, and love on the other reflects Tagore's concept of the harmony of the opposites. And we find a reflection of this in the Śāntiniketan essay. I will quote from the essay Law, where Tagore says, I quote, "He who is the progenitor," so progenitor with capital P, "is himself the friend. Again, it is he who is the lawgiver. Hence, whatever be the law, essentially, there is no fear," end quote. So the law, it is the job of the lawgiver to maintain discipline and see that the universal law is followed, while as the friend, he's ready to make exceptions in the realm of love. So essentially, there cannot be any fear because on one hand, there is the friend, and on the other, there is the lawgiver. So this idea is prevalent in Śāntiniketan essays, and it is also there in other Tagore texts as well. The reconciliation of opposites, according to Tagore, is possible because there is love, because it is love that brings them together. Earlier, I had mentioned to Naravane and his idea that his idea of Tagore's concept of bliss and joy. Regarding this, I would refer to the idea of Ladini Shakti, and according to Swami Tapasyananda, it is, I quote, "the energy by which he, that is the supreme reality, enjoys his own innate bliss and makes others enjoy the same," end quote. So there are several examples regarding this in the Śāntiniketan essays, but I'm going to refer to only one essay, and I quote, detachment, "The joy that is felt is love itself. That love does not bind. That love pulls us along. That love is pure and unopposed. It is that very love which is mukti, the death of all attachments," end quote. We find that Tagore gives all importance to bliss. In the essay, This Shore, the Other Shore, Tagore says, I quote, "It is that bliss which has rendered that infinite motion to the universe," end quote. So the motion here is God's action, which provides bliss. Again, I would refer to Swami Tapasyananda, who says, I quote, "The functions of the Shaktis of Krishna," so Shaktis, that means powers, Krishna could be any god, "is to carry out his will and contribute to his sportive manifestations which form the expression of his essential nature as bliss," end quote. So in the essay, The Eternal Abode, we find that Tagore says, I quote, "The Supreme Atman is full of bliss in this individual Atman. Where there is the never-ending union of that love, enter there and look at that place. Only then would you realize within the very depth of your heart what the bliss of Brahman is," end quote. So it is due to that supreme reality that he carries out it is the supreme reality that carries out his manifestation, and his manifestation, the act of carrying it out, is his action. He takes man, who is the finite being, and elevates him to the level of the infinite, and vice versa. The idea of love is based primarily on God sacrificing his own self or his divinity to be manifested in the all-pervading humanity. So in Purusha Suktam, we see that Prajapati, that is the supreme God, himself sacrifices. He himself sacrifices in order to kind of manifest, and the pranas of Prajapati, who are the gods, the devas, they're binding Prajapati as if he's a sacrificial animal to be sacrificed. So in the essay 3, Tagore asserts, to establish that welfare in the world, all self-interests get completely defeated, and we understand to what extent the nature of true union is established by pure self-sacrifice. When we understand that completely, only then does it become possible to attain unimpeded union in love in every way with Advaitam, who is the supreme Atman in the form of oneness, end quote. So when self-interest gets totally defeated, only then there can be love. And when there is love, there is obviously self-sacrifice. And only when there is self-sacrifice do you have an unimpeded union with the divine or the supreme Atman in this essay. So it is not that only God undergoes self-sacrifice to attain union with the humans, but it is also the humans who do the same through the concept of renunciation, neti neti. So though we find the finite and the infinite are apparently different, they are essentially united. And this brings us to Tagore's affinity towards the doctrine of achinta bheda bhed, that is inconceivable identity in difference. So the word achinta is a Sanskrit word, and it's a combination of the word meaning non and chinta meaning logical or conceivable. Hence achinta means illogical or inconceivable. That means something which goes beyond logic. So it's not illogical but alogical. The conjoined Sanskrit words bheda bhed happens to be combination of bheda meaning difference and abheda meaning non-difference. Regarding this, let's take Swami Tapasyananda and what he says in his book, The Bhakti Schools of Vedanta, and he says, I quote, Bengal school of Vaishnavism propounds the doctrine of inconceivable identity in difference. Shakti is both identical and different from Shaktimat. At the same time, the element of identity makes the supreme reality non-dual even in the midst of difference. How these two contradictory features can coexist is not attempted to be explained logically. This is why it has been indicated as achinta, that means illogical or incomprehensible by thought, end quote. So that which is finite is different from the infinite, yet it is identical to the infinite. So in the essay, The Whole, Tagore beautifully explains this concept. I quote, when man attempts to see the whole all at once, he sees it hazily. Hence, he first sees it in parts, and then he unites the parts into whole. For this reason, if he sees only the parts and completely denies the whole, then he has to be seriously answerable for that. Again, if he only aims at the whole and completely ignores the parts, then that emptiness becomes futile, totally futile for him, end quote. So, though apparently the parts, which means the finite, and the whole, the infinite, seem to be different, they are inconceivably identical to each other. There is another example. I think I might just skip that. And this is the example. And it also has the same idea. So I will quickly skip skip that and I'll draw a parallel to Swami Vivekananda's speech in the essay, in the speech, The Open Secret, where he says, I quote, "Take a grain of sand, analyze it. We start with the assumption that it is finite, and at last we find that it is not. It is infinite." End quote. It is not finite simply because of its identity with the infinite. In spite of that fact, it is different. These concepts find another elaboration in Swami Vivekananda's sermon to Madame Emma Calvé, where he was talking about the immortality of the soul, and he talks about a drop which had fallen to the ocean and was crying about his, or rather mourning about his loss of individuality. And Swami Vivekananda goes on to say to Madame Calvé what the ocean offered as advice to the drop of water. I quote, "When you join me, you join all your brothers and sisters, the other drops of water of which I am made. You become the ocean itself. If you wish to leave me, you have only to rise up on a sunbeam into the clouds, from where you can descend again, little drop of water, a blessing and a benediction to the thirsty earth." End quote. So when the individual finite Atman, that is the drop of water, becomes one with the infinite Atman, the ocean, it loses its finiteness, and whenever it wishes to serve humanity, it can assume its finiteness. This brings us to the concept of Vijnana, where Tagore's concept of harmony between opposites bears similarity. So Tagore finds harmony in opposites like the positive and the negative, or the finite and the infinite. It is interesting to note that the word also features in the Upanishad. So it's not that the concept of Vijnana, so I'm going to draw a parallel between Tagore's thought and the concept of Vijnana as propounded by Sri Ramakrishna, but that does not mean that the word never existed before. It is a word which we find in the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and the Brahma Sutras. And no researcher has ever drawn a parallel between the concept of Sri Ramakrishna's concept of Vijnana and Bhavamukha to Tagore's philosophy as yet. So let us refer to what Sri Ramakrishna calls Vijnana. So he's explaining this idea by differentiating between a Jnani and a Vijnani, and he says, the Jnani, I quote, this is from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, "The Jnani gives up his identification with worldly things, discriminating, not this, not this. Only then can he realize Brahman. It is like reaching the roof of a house by leaving the steps behind, one by one. But the Vijnani, who is more intimately acquainted with Brahman, realizes something more. He realizes that the steps are made of materials as the roof, bricks, lime, and brick dust. That which is realized intuitively as Brahman through the eliminating process of not this, is then found to have become the universe and all its living beings. The Vijnani sees that the reality which is nirguna without attributes is also saguna with attributes." End quote. So after realizing Brahman, or the supreme reality, the Vijnani realizes that the world is a manifestation of that supreme reality enclosed in name and form. So name like objects or people, and like humans, animals, and form like how they are. And as the Gita, Bhagavad Gita mentions, the Vijnani is intent upon the welfare of all created beings. So it's, I quote, "Sarva bhuta hite rata," end quote. So a Jnani renounces the world of name and form and stays immersed in Brahman, that is, in the Sat, Chit, Ananda. So Sat, existence, Chit, consciousness, Ananda, bliss aspects. But a Vijnani sees the world as the manifestation of the supreme reality, Brahman, and does not see the world as unreal as the Jnani does, that is Mithya. So the Jnani does not consider the world as the sport of the supreme reality, but a Vijnani does. So I'm going to quote another essay by in the Śāntiniketan Essays, translated by me, of course. And this essay is ferry me across, and there is a similar concept. And Tagore says, I quote, "Do not presume," they say, "ferry us from this work of ours." Sorry, ferry us from this very work of ours. They want to stay amid their work and be ferried across. And that is why their work is not being neglected as they sing. End quote. So this is like a Vijnani, because they are doing the work, understanding this is the Leela. This work, their role in the world is like the Leela, the sport. This concept of Vijnana, obviously, like I had mentioned, can be traced to the Upanishad. So due to lack of time, I'll just skip that. So immortality, I quote from the Kena Upanishad, where it mentions, immortality is attained through absolute knowledge of the immortal. Through the Atman, strength is obtained. Through the knowledge, immortality is obtained, end quote. So it is not the state of jnana. It is not that the state of jnana is considered to be inferior or maybe non-existent to Vijnana, but it is absolutely a necessary step to proceed to the Vijnana stage, where he realizes that everything is the sport of Brahman. So regarding this view, Swami Vivekananda also offers in his essay, The Open Secret or the Speech, he says, I quote, "Whoever thinks that I am little makes a mistake, for the self is all that exists. The sun exists because I declare it does. The world exists because I declare it does. Without me, they cannot remain, for I am existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute, ever happy, ever pure, ever beautiful," end quote. Tagore in his, so it sees, you can see that since finite and infinite are one and same, this concept is possible. Tagore in the essay Day mentions, I'll quote, "We will realize the Atman everywhere. This is the only aspiration of the Atman," end quote. And this is exactly what a Vijnani does. And the idea of staying in Bhava Mukha consists in this particular thought, practically. An important gift of Sri Ramakrishna philosophy is that of Bhava Mukha. And Swami Saradananda, a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, quotes in his book, in the Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master, and goes on to explain, I quote, "Do not remain in the nirguna by the complete margins of the I-ness, but live your life and do good to people, being in constant, complete, and immediate knowledge of the fact that you are none other than that limitless I," end quote. So it is evident in the next example from the Śāntiniketan essay, in the essay Beauty. Tagore remarks, I quote, "In the unusual realm of this I, within our inner Atman, there is coming and going of that blissful one, and there is evidence of that throughout the universe," end quote. So a Vijnani not only is merged in God consciousness, but also sees everything as the manifestation of God. At that state of consciousness, finite, infinite, real, unreal, absolute, relative, are all one and the same manifestation of divinity. In the essay Night, Tagore remarks that self-realization takes place in spite of the fact that realized person is, I quote, "amidst the variety and plenty of the world," end quote. So that means there is no need for anyone to go away from the society to realize God. So a Vijnani is being fully merged with Brahman and also remains fully aware that this world is the manifestation of the same Brahman. So the attributeless and also with attributes. Again, I quote Swami Vivekananda, and he says, I quote, every grain of sand, every thought, every soul, everything that exists is infinite. Infinite is finite, and finite infinite, end quote. This finds expression many times in Rabindranath Tagore's Śāntiniketan Essays. I would like to come to a conclusion with this would be the last quotation from the essays, and Maitreya's prayer. So Maitreya is the wife of Yajnavalkya. And she says, and this particular quotation reveals how the finite-infinite divide can be overcome. I quote, we find it, that is Amrita, that is the divine nectar, where we have love. Amid this love itself, we get a taste of the infinite. It is love itself which puts the shadow of the infinite within the finite, transforms old into new, and never accepts death. When we observe the trace of love within the diverse matters of the world, we get to know the Supreme Being who is beyond death. Through this, we understand that his true nature is the embodiment of love, end quote. So love is one of the most important things that can foster oneness in the human race. In Śāntiniketan Essays, Tagore posits that two opposites can meet at a middle point, and that middle point is love. Śāntiniketan Essays are not only rich in their contents, but also because Tagore has conveyed such great truths in such simple manner, using such simple examples to make it easy for readers of all age groups, culture, and race to understand. These essays reveal Tagore's profound philosophical and spiritual thoughts. Today, amidst the post-pandemic and ongoing inhumanity, it is perhaps through a sense of spiritual well-being and love that one can experience true fulfillment in life and bring about a balance in order to arise, awake, and surmount the adversities of life. Thank you so much for a patient hearing. I think you have to unmute. We cannot hear you. No. No, I can lip read that you're saying, but no. I'm sorry, there must be some issues, technical issues.
Yeah, thank you very much, madam. I think she has some network issue from her side. She'll join very soon. Thank you very much for your talk. We have a few questions, madam. The first question, by Professor Jaden Patil. What are Tagore's views on education? What does he say about the role of regional languages?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. It's an interesting question. That Tagore, the biggest example would be Tagore's Śāntiniketan Vishwa Bharati that he set up. So it's something to foster intellectual connection among all the people of the world. And his views were basically, there cannot be any particular view, but if you see Vishwa Bharati, his concept behind that, you would see that he goes beyond the national barriers and goes on to transcend it and foster a universal brotherhood through education and intellectual exchange. And regarding regional language, Tagore always enhanced or liked the study of different cultures. So he himself has, it is said in Bengali that if you read Rabindranath Tagore, you have read more than half of world literature. So he has haikus, and he has, if you read Tagore, you find that he has read so many philosophers and literature persons, and he has also reproduced things in his own way. So he just did not read them, but he had his own interpretation, even for the haikus. And so he always encouraged understanding among human beings, anything that would enhance understanding among human beings. So an international concept of exchange, as well as learning different languages, these both enhance his ability to understand peoples of the world, different cultures, different people, different people of different ideologies. And he was an all-accepting person. He believed in all-inclusiveness. Because if you see in Vishwa Bharati, different languages are being taught, including Chinese, international languages. And this whole idea of cultural exchange came from his concept of Vishwa Bharati, the concept of Vishwa, all right? So world, all-encompassing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, madam. Shabreen, madam, you please proceed.
Yes, sir. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Sir, we have a question from Professor Patil, sir. Is it okay, ma'am?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are Tagore's views on education? What does he say about the role of regional languages?
Oh, we just covered this one, madam. So I
Sorry.
think
Yeah.
no problem,
Yeah.
no problem at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, it was disconnected due to weather.
We understood that.
We have a question from Saumita Sarkar. Madam, please relate any one of these concepts with real life.
Okay, that is very interesting, because in real life, the concepts I've talked about, harmony of the opposites or love, I know that they're very difficult to practice. But again, I'm in a different country, coming from India, which is also a very diverse country. So if the concept of love and harmony of the opposites were actually not practiced in some way or the other, I think we would all have disintegrated, or we would not have been in harmony, because we talk about unity in diversity. And where does that come from? It basically comes from love. And when all the diverse kinds of people come together, it is also the harmony of opposites. Because without, the idea that my views might differ from yours, but we still agree with it. Okay, and we are all together. For example, the concept of the melting pot in the United States, or the idea of multiculturalism, all come from the same idea. And I think this is practically proved in different nations and different countries, because America is very diverse, just like India. India has people from um, people of different religious groups, different languages, different cultures. Even in Bengal, we have like Bengali is being spoken in different ways in different parts of Bengal. I'm sure it's the same for Telugu or Tamil, or like even Hindi, for example. I mean, it varies from province to province. So whatever it is, I think everyone is together, so there must be a reason. There is love, of course. There is a bonding that unites all humanity together. And for example, I'm in a different country, I'm on a Fulbright, but everybody has made me feel so welcome and so at home here. And therefore it gives me the idea that love is an overwhelming force and it is present everywhere. And so even if the concepts or the ideas don't match, what Tagore says is like, even though they're opposites, it is love which is the binding force, and it makes it very easy to accept people. For example, if I take a real life example, a mother rebukes her child. Okay. But does she hate the child? No, she doesn't. She might rebuke the child, and it might apparently look like, oh my God, she's a bad mother. She's rebuking the child for doing something silly. And he's just only a child. He's not an adult. So why is the mother doing so? But it is again love. So after rebuking the child, and this is very common in India, after rebuking the child, she again calls the child to her and offers her a lot of goodies, and the child forgets that the mother had rebuked him or her and accepts the mother. So this concept actually happens in real life. It's only maybe we do not think it does, but it is everywhere, because Tagore's thoughts are very reflective, and he has gone through a lot of experiences himself, loss of friends, loss of family, and he has understood that this is the philosophy of life.
Ma'am, we have a question. Am I audible, ma'am?
I think the volume is a little low. Yeah, but I can still hear you.
Ma'am, we have a question from Dr. Anil Kumar Mishra.
Okay.
What could be the finest difference between religion and spirituality?
Okay. Thank you for this question. There is a very fine divide, and I'll put it very simply. I think we in India understand the difference very clearly, because different people practice, and not just in India, all over the world, different people practice their faith in different ways. Some are religious about it, and some are spiritual about it. So when we talk about religion, if you translate the word in Sanskrit and you talk about dharma, that means a totally different thing. Because dharma not only means upholding of values, maybe, but also a faith. And also another meaning would be doing one's duty. Another would be religion. So I would interpret dharma, and as is commonly done, as the ritualistic practice of a particular religion, okay, or a faith, rather. So ritualistic practice. And when you talk about spirituality, it is more on one-on-one relationship with the divine. All right. It does not, it goes beyond the ritualistic practices.
Yes, ma'am. We have a question from Dr. Seema Singh. In which language did Tagore predominantly write? Were the Śāntiniketan essays written in Bengal?
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Singh, for that question. Tagore predominantly wrote in Bengali, and then he translated his own writings into English. He kept saying that, oh, my English isn't good, but his kind of English actually won him the Nobel Prize. So you can see how humble he must have been, and he was rather. And what was the other part of the question? One was predominantly, yes, okay, the Śāntiniketan essays. Yes, absolutely. The Śāntiniketan essays were written in Bengali. Very fine, terse, yet simple prose. It was so fine and simple that it was really difficult to translate. So I have translated the Śāntiniketan essays, and this particular book that I have translated is published by Routledge. And this book, this is Rabindranath Tagore's Śāntiniketan Essays, Religion, Spirituality, and Philosophy. And this book is the only book on Śāntiniketan essays you would find in English, which has critical work and critical mention about it. And elaborately, the essays have glossary and notes. That is the translated essays. You would find it has been reviewed by different international high-profile journals as well, and they have made their comments on this book. It was so difficult because the book is not just a very simple book to translate. It apparently, when you read in Bengali, it is very simple and it just flows. So when I was teaching this particular, some of the essays of this book in the US university that I'm in, I found one of my students saying that this poem, so I gave them some essays to read, and she was referring to a particular essay, and she said, this poem. And I said, hold on, why do you call this a poem? And then she was like baffled a bit. And I said, no, go ahead. I'm asking you a question because I want to know. I find your comment very interesting. And she says that, well, it reads like a poem. I said, wow, because originally these essays were written in prose poetry by Tagore. Tagore is a very talented person. And it was very difficult for me to translate these essays, trying to keep the rhythm. It is impossible to have the rhythm of Bengali into English, but I made sure that I read the essays aloud and there were no tongue twisters, and the essays sounded poetic because I also write poems. So I made sure, of course, I'm not of the level of Rabindranath Tagore. I write my own poems just to feel good about them. So I made sure that the prose pieces, poetic prose pieces, are translated in that way. And every language, Tagore has something very interesting. He uses a particular word and keeps repeating it like a motive. And he goes on. And then he has a similar, he has the same word as the title of another essay. So it is very unique how he repeats every idea throughout the collection of essays. So it's sort of magical how he does it, because these are not earlier prepared talks. He's delivering them impromptu, and right from the beginning, this concept arises. So from the first essay to the last essay, there is a chain which binds the other essays. So there is a thread which binds the other essays. Using the word chain was a mistake. Thread would be a better word. And then you had pearls, strewn throughout the thread. So, and the other essays are those pearls. So it's wonderful how he had this unity of idea across that period of 1908 to 1914. And it's not that he was only writing these essays during that time. He had other things. He got the Nobel Prize in 1913 for his Gitanjali collections in 1912. He translated some of his poetry collections and called them Gitanjali song offerings. And so you see that he has been traveling also. So he has been doing a lot of things during this period. So for example, the sadhana essays are also talks, and they're written in English. But Śāntiniketan was originally written in Bangla, and you also had Sanskrit. So when I was translating, it was really a trilingual translation, because the target language was English, and then you had very little of Pali and Sanskrit, which I taught myself, and then Bengali. So the primary language was Bangla, but there were Upanishads. And Tagore also, you cannot get any standard translation. You cannot put in a standard translation of the Upanishads, because he mentions you have to read the original, that is the Sanskrit, and interpret it yourself. Do not follow the interpretation of others. So the whole concept was very difficult. So I guess that answers your question.
Ma'am, we have a last and very interesting question from Aravindan sir. Could you please connect the thoughts of Rabindranath Tagore's idea on education to the present day ELT concept marketed throughout the world in the name of innovation? How far these thoughts...
I'm sorry, madam. What concept? Can you just repeat that part?
Could you please connect these thoughts, the thoughts which you have explained? Thoughts of Rabindranath Tagore's idea on education to the present day ELT concept marketed throughout the world.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. That is so interesting. Yes, and we are in ELTAI. So again, if we take, yes, I know that ELT is really marketed, but can we do without it? That's the question. Today, in this webinar of 203 participants or more maybe, could we have actually communicated with each other if I just spoke in Bangla, or Sabrina ma'am had spoken in Telugu, or even some other language? I don't think we could have. So ELT, I know it is marketed, and it is sometimes marketing is not bad. So I think it brings communities and people together. So anything which helped to bring people of diverse cultures and languages together would be good. And Tagore would have, of course, supported it, because bringing together of people are important. And that is why, of course, it's always better to learn different languages. In fact, before the webinar started, Sabrina ma'am and I, we were in a discussion, and I was saying that it is no Indian is just monolingual. We are like from birth, we know at least 2 or 3 languages, and if not more. Many people have know 7, 8 languages, regional languages. So I think that's very interesting, because we have so many cultures and so many people from different cultures. So it's always good to know more languages. But again, especially for engineers, it's important to know English language. And without that, they do not get jobs. So I think anything which is for the people and it's benefiting people are good in a way. But of course, we must not stop knowing regional languages, because I grew up in Nigeria and my mother taught me Bengali rigorously at home. So I was homeschooled in Bengali, and I had my normal syllabus, which was all in English. And when I came back home, my mother made sure I did the grammar and everything. So the respect for the mother tongue and respect for the regional languages must always be there. But anything which will bond us to the whole world is also necessary, I believe.
Thank you, ma'am. Due to time constraint, we are stopping for the question. Thank you for your excellent presentation and giving an insight information, the ideology of Rabindranath Tagore's Śāntiniketan essay, especially finite and infinite love in the 21st century. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much for inviting me on this occasion.
I would like to propose a vote of thanks, and I feel privileged to thank the executive members of ELTAI Webinar Committee for coordinating and helping us to make this session accomplished. And I also thank all the participants for their active participation throughout the session. I would also thank all the technical team members of ELTAI Webinar Committee for relentlessly helping us to initiate this session excellently. Thank you very much. And I wish you all the mothers a happy Mother's Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being part of this webinar. A feedback link has been posted in the chat box. I request all the participants to fill in the form. Now let me announce the next webinar. The next webinar, the 99th webinar, is on 15th May, titled Language Across the Curriculum. Mr. Arvindan Sen Gupta is the speaker. Dr. S. Shankar Kumar will moderate this session. I request you all to register for this webinar and participate in it also. I have final announcement. I'm very glad to announce that ELTAI has released ELTAI newsletter. So you can download it from ELTAI website. A link also has been posted. From this link also you can download it. Some of the finest columns by well-known columnists and professors have been published in this ELTAI newsletter, and the activities of ELTAI through its chapters across India also have been mentioned in this newsletter. I request you all to download this newsletter and read it. Once again, thank you very much. See you on next Sunday. Thank you very much.